associates and should be filed accordingly.
Madam Mayor, I agree with you. When you look at this, the casual observer would read this bottom right-hand corner, it says source Horton and Associates.
That's
And
the source.
you would get the illusion or the impression that these words to the right of these graphs were Burton's words and their figures. And we haven't substantiated that, so I don't think it's appropriate.
If I could weigh in.
Sure.
We were just talking about this really isn't a court case, so having records and documents gets a little different. It would be reflected in the clerk's notes that these things have been done to this document. So that,
Or acceptable to everybody to simply write on the top for Commissioner McBoy, then everybody knows where it came from.
That, I have no objection to that. I do insist that this be in and the 3 documents from Burton be in, because you look at them, you'll see that that 1% comes straight out of the document. The year that it crosses the target comes straight out of the document. In fact, it's in the email that's in front of you as well. And the 76 cents comes straight out of the document. I did the subtraction between the rates that they gave for 16 and 17. And I rounded it, because one year it was 78 and one year it was 73. Took the even, the number. But all of that information, with the exception of healthy, because I couldn't think of a short word to put in there for achieves target, which wouldn't fit, comes straight out of that document.
I would think that,
So put them all 4 in there. Put this and put the 3 Burtons.
if they're going to be on public record, they're already on public record, so that's fine with me.
Well, I just
If they are on public record, they're not going to be put in any formal documents, they're going to be on public record.
As long as the clerk could clearly note that the red markings on these graphs are those of Commissioner McBoy's.
Correct.
And the option narratives to the right are Commissioner McBoy's.
Correct.
Not that, specifically not that of Burton and Associates.
Correct.
can I suggest that we add the full
Yeah.
data? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and Naragi, the finance director, is very correct. There's a lot of moving pieces. When y'all were looking at that specific issue, you were having to contemplate all the data in its totality when you were making adjustments before. So we can take the scenarios and put it on the full sheet if you want to do it that way.
Just, if you include Burton's report, it has exactly that.
Yeah.
It has
It's
everything,
17 pages,
right.
and all the backup and the whole
Well,
thing.
for example, it says, the CIP percentage 100% and, full expenditure of the budget, you
Yeah,
never
all that
completely
stuff's
spend that, as a percentage, it just never happens. So there's all kinds of assumptions in here that somebody needs to look at the entire study when they look at one piece of it. So we can add that whole sheet, if that's appropriate, and have them run each scenario.
I'm fine with that.
It's all in.
Is that good,
That's fine.
Commissioner? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Thank
The
you.
question I have for you is that, how would you go about doing a rate increase with the ordinance that we have on the books?
I would refer to our city attorney as to how one does the legal aspects. My job is, as an elected official representing the residents of this city, which includes its own publicly owned utility, my job is to make sure that we are operating the various things that we have in a business, according to accepted business practices. And what I've seen for a while here is an indication that we clearly are not. And so how one does it, and whether the process is ideal and should have been done differently, I have no arguments with that whatsoever. I think we should have had an explicit rate study 3 months ago, like we have done every other year. And this would have all come out at that time, and we could have chosen to. The fact that I only got this information and was aware that the city had it as early as last week, and I only got it yesterday, I can't do anything about that. And I think it's immaterial to the issue of, we have the information, the city has had it, we've had it. I can't see any reason, I can't see any way that it's responsible to not correct a problem when you're aware of it, and as soon as possible. And that would suggest that you need to do either a 1% or 2%. I had raised last week, we'll do a 0.5%.
Get back to the question. How do you go about violating the law that we created as a commission for rate parity? How do you increase rates when we all approved a law that forces us to be at rate parity? How do you go about doing that and raising the rate? That's the question I'm asking.
Two questions for that. First, that's our own rule
It's a law.
that we made. Well, It's our own rule. Our responsibility is to manage the city. We created a law that said our business model is we're not going to look at revenues and expenses, we're just simply going to set a rate. That is not a business model that would stand up in any MBA program anywhere. You can't do that.
I have an answer to that.
So,
I have an answer to that, okay? This is let's go back in time.
I wasn't quite
Oh,
done.
please.
Okay. Two questions. One is, I think it might be incumbent upon us to find out if we added 76 cents a month to the average bill, would we still, in fact, be in compliance with our own law, as you pointed out? And my guess is that we would. Because we're not at rate parity with FPL right now. And whether we're 76 cents out of $120 or $100 for the average bill, I think it's $114.73 or something or other, on that order, whether we shifted 76 cents one way or the other is basically immaterial.
So don't
It's
obey
a
the law.
0.66% change. The bigger law that's operating here is it wise to operate a utility at below the recommended reserves when that's known information and you know that you are not only operating it below, but you're headed downward? You have an option that relatively easily fixes that. You can choose to do it, or you can choose not to do it.
I think that one of the things that we go through every budget cycle, and every year I think I say the same thing over and over again, is that it's a moving document. When we go through the budget, we have the necessity that we have to approve of it, and we can always go back and make budget amendments if need be on certain issues. This is a strong issue, and I understand Commissioner McBoy feels strongly about it, but again, what we're trying to do is to create an atmosphere in which we're consistent. He made a comment just a little bit earlier saying, well, we had this money here, and then Jack came in, and we found this money here, and the money's different. We've been trying for the last several years to get a proper accounting of the finances in the city in each department, and we've been making the changes to do just that. A perfect example, and this was, I believe, a commission that you were on years back, and I'm going to use this analogy just for the purpose of what you're accusing this commission of doing right now. In fiscal year 2009, Burton and Associates did a rate study, and their recommendation was to raise the water rates by 13.25% in 2009, 13.25% in 2010, 13.25% in 2011, same 13.25 in 12, and in fiscal year 2013, another 13.25%. The following year, they decided that they weren't going to raise it that much, because before that it was over a 20% increase at that, and that's when the RO plan came into place. They decided, even though Burton Associates said that we needed to raise it by 13.25, over the next 5 years, the City Commission voted to change it to 11%, and then 12, 11%, 2013, 11%, and then back it down to 14 and 15 to 4%. Following year, the Commission didn't do that. In fact, they decided not to listen to Burton and Associates, and not to listen to the 11% increase that was down from 13.25%, but to instead lower it to 5.2% for 12, 5.25% for 13, 5.25% for 14, 5.25% for 15, and 5.25% for 16. But in the budget process of 2011, in September of that year, they instead voted to not listen to Burton and Associates again, and to not raise the water rates at all. 0% for 2013, 0% for 2014. However, in 2015, a 4.5% increase would kick in, 16 a 4.5% increase, and 17 a 4.5% increase. So these are just perfect examples of what the Commission did and what was recommended by Burton Associates, and if that was the fiscally responsible thing to do, we certainly know that in addition to not raising the rates, which we did raise the water rates because we had to, but we didn't have to those 2 years, but we had to raise it by 5% according to the water manager then. Now we lowered it to 3% because of the actual that is there financially and what we're actually facing. Getting to the point, moving documents, a lot of things factor into play in this. You're talking about a 1% increase, and here was a 13.25% increase that was supposed to have been made over a 5-year period to keep us fiscally stable and to do the fiduciary responsibility of what we're supposed to be doing. And none of the Commission at that time, through 2011, listened to Burton Associates to set us on the right path. Vice Mayor?
And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, we borrowed at least $6 million, to construct that casino building, which a large portion of that came out of the water fund. And on top of that, we borrowed an untold number of dollars for the infrastructure on the beachfront property. So not only do we continue to find ways to keep things solvent and stable, but we also found millions of dollars to throw at a beach project that now we're going to have a conversation about in 3 minutes when we're done talking about the electric. The point is, this commission and the previous commissions have tried diligently, working with staff, the new staff that's coming on, the new ideas that are coming into play, the new discoveries that are being made, and we're finding efficiencies, we're finding mistakes, be it, I'm sure all of which were, most of which were honestly made or whatever. The point is, the process works. The process is working for the people. Our staff is doing their job. They're finding the efficiencies. They're showing us a better way. And we as policymakers are taking their advice and thinking it through. And we're thinking almost out of the box. I'll give you an example. When I came back to the commission, I was really exasperated over the idea that 50% of our general fund revenues were coming from utility-related revenues, which we were able to point that out in fiscal year 2010. That was an aha moment for the commission back then, because everybody insisted that I was nuts. That really wasn't the case, that there really wasn't 50% of our $15 million coming out of utility-related revenues. But it was shown right there on that wall that it was. And I, as a member of the minority of the commission at that time, was able to persuade the commission to finally reduce the electric rates for the first time possibly in the history of our city, at least that I can recall. And that's what started the trend that we're still talking about today. And in these 5 years, if you count this budget year that we're going to talk about tonight, we haven't touched the millage rate. So we've reduced our electric rates, we've reduced the contributions to the general fund, yet we've maintained the millage rate. And we've been able to do that because, in my opinion, we have done what we set out to do in part, and that is to remove some of the disincentives to investing in this community. And by doing that, and having the economy turn around a little bit, with a little bit of good luck, our property values are starting to rise. And as our property values start to rise, we're seeing the shift from the money that was once taken out of the cookie jar they called the utilities, now is coming in the form of property taxes, which is the way it should be. I suspect in the next few years, we're going to hit a critical mass point where we're going to have enough property taxes coming in, we're going to start dropping the village rate too, on top of the electric rates. And then what's going to happen in our town? I think our town's going to take off like a rocket, because we have identified the disincentives that have held this town back for generations, and we're doing something about it. And it's unfortunate that some folks subscribe to that old way of doing business. But I'm committed, and I think some of us up here are committed, to going in a vastly different direction, doing the right thing for the people of Lake Worth, that they don't have to spend as much today as they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago to live in paradise.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yeah, if I might, could you remind us what year it was that you convinced the commission to not raise the electric rates you just mentioned?
If my memory serves me correct, my first year back, so that would have been the budget cycle for the fall of 2010, so the 10-11 budget is when we identified the 50% contribution to the general fund. It was the following year that we reduced the electric rates for the first time. That's my recollection.
2010 or 2011?
No, it would have been 11,
Okay.
11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, and this will be the 5th year. We either reduced or maintained our
And
electric rates.
I would just like to inject a little bit of factual information into some of that. I do not contest that you influenced the electric rates at that point. However, if you go back and look at the, don't ask me what CAFR stands for, but there are gentlemen here who can tell. CAFR. It's our comprehensive,
Annual financial report.
that one. It's where we put our best numbers and the outside auditors review them. If you go back in that and you look at that, it lists for the last 10 years, 2005 to 2014, the average monthly residential electric bill. It's basically flat. It hasn't done much of anything. So this policy of changing the rate is a wonderful thing to be able to talk about. But in practice, it's done almost nothing to people's bills. And you're welcome to look at the data and disagree with it and say, well, that's McCoy's data. Look at it in the report yourself. I just graphed it out. I was somewhat surprised that the bill has stayed pretty much flat, but it has. So what we have done is we've had very little influence on people's actual bills, which is what they care about. Some people have average bills that are around 110, 120, and they've been at that number for 10 years. Some people have bills that are much higher. Those are the ones that are the problem. It's got nothing to do with the rate. It never had anything to do with the rate. The rate, in practice, has very little influence on the community. What the rate does have an influence, that 76 cents, or say $1, $2 a month, it's irrelevant to somebody who's got a $100, which is your typical bill, your average bill. It's irrelevant to that, but it's extremely relevant to the health and well-being of the utility. That's the difference. And that's where I have a concern that we are making choices that in fact do not do much of anything for residents in terms of their real bill. The data supports that, but they are doing unhealthy things for the utility.
So should we penalize families that have 4 children and that take a
I think
shower
we
a day
should
or whatever?
Penalize them 76 cents a month. That does not strike me as a penalizing.
People didn't want to pay $5 a year to change something. What, 76 cents isn't a big deal. Oh, should we add that to the 80 cents we're paying more for water thanks to the beach casino project? Or should we, nobody cares about that, it's $1 here, $5 there, everybody cares about it. We're not reflecting, we're sitting here talking in circles about something that the people are gonna have to pay on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. One of the biggest disincentives to the city has been the electric rates, or the electric bills, or the electric whatever else it is. Lowering that is important, and that's what the people want at this point. We have somebody who came here, an expert, our new staff member, who says that there's a lot of good working parts here that can put us into a positive direction. In addition to that, is not recommending a rate hike at that point. In addition to that, we created a policy and a law that, Glenn, if you want to chime in at this point, what would you have to do an increase rate against the law that we proposed here?
Well, you probably have to either repeal or amend your ordinance. When you adopted an ordinance, and you all know the process, you have 2 readings, and you can either repeal it or amend it. Because, you know, my memory is, you said you'd be with FP&L in 5 years. I think this is year 3. So I don't know how close you are to parity, but I don't believe we're there yet.
$4 and
Less than 5%.
So again,
$4
it's
and something
doable, but
cents
the
per
commission
1,000
have to
kilowatt hours.
amend or repeal, you know, what you passed.
May
Correct. Vice Mayor?
I just don't know how much we're gonna gain by carrying on the conversation. I'm disappointed with Commissioner McVoy's expertise and education, that he doesn't understand the relationship of a rate. I mean, 1,000 kilowatts at this rate is not as much as 1,000 kilowatts at a higher rate. It's a choice that people make. So if their bills haven't changed, perhaps it's a lifestyle thing. Maybe they've not reduced their consumption, which is, you have advocated all along, reduce the consumption. Okay, you're right. It's not just the rate, it's reducing the consumption that we use at home. But conversely, I would suggest that there are people in this community right now that are able to turn on their air conditioning today that couldn't turn on their air conditioning 5 years ago because of the cost of electricity. And to me, that's a quality of life enhancement that I'm very proud of.
Commissioner Marceau?
Call the vote, please.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Moving on to City Attorney, item C, would you read the ordinance, please? You're all ready for me, right?
Jump ahead of me here. Ordinance number 2015-13 of the City of Lake Worth, Florida, establishing committed fund balances, designated the city manager to assign fund balances in accordance with the City of Lake Worth Code, and providing for the effective date.
Second?
Second.
Any public comment cards on this?
No, ma'am.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. New business item 4A, resolution number 55-2015, establish the rates and charges for the city sub-regional sewer utility for fiscal year 2016.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
public comment cards?
None?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Have a great